Hospitality is one of the few industries where every purchasing decision touches every guest experience. And yet, in most luxury hotels, ownership, management, and on-property operations are still making procurement decisions without a shared strategy. The result is fragmented supplier relationships, missed negotiating power, and operational friction that quietly cost properties more than they realize. Today, we explore what it looks like when those three layers ultimately operate as one in our session, The Power of One, aligning ownership, management, and operations for smarter procurement.
We get it. Running your business means juggling 1,000 priorities, meeting guest expectations, tackling labor challenges, chasing cost savings, and navigating procurement processes that never end, making focus impossible. That's where we come in. We're Avendra International, your partner in purchasing and beyond. With a global network, deep expertise, and a commitment to your success, we simplify procurement at every touchpoint. Laser focusing on vendor procurement to save you money. Supercharging your supply chain with personalized insights and solutions. Supplying your infrastructure with the tools to sustain your future business. We're not here to take over. We're here to take you further. Covering all of your essentials so you can focus on creating exceptional experiences. Supporting every detail of your guest experience. Streamlining kitchen operations with smarter procurement. Ensuring quality from delivery to service. Supplying spa, wellness, and fitness solutions for every property. Elevating dining experiences with smarter sourcing. Supporting operations at every level of your property. The power of a partner that works as an extension of your team. Whatever you need, we get it. Not all GPOs are created equal. We get that strong relationships are at the heart of your business. They're at the heart of ours. And we focus on what we know matters most: your people, your operations, and your success. The future of your business starts now. Let's do it together.
You're watching the International Luxury Hotel Association webinar series. We unite a global ecosystem of over 1 million professionals to cut through the noise and architect the future of luxury hospitality. Today's session is brought to you by Avendra International, a leading procurement services organization in the hospitality industry. Now over to our moderator, Dorian Murphy, Director of Strategic Luxury Accounts, Avendra International.
Welcome, everyone. Thank you for joining us today. I'm Dorian Murphy, Director of Luxury Accounts at Avendra International, and I'd like to welcome you to International Luxury Hotel Association's webinar on The Power of One, aligning ownership, management, and operations for smarter procurement. Today's webinar is brought to you by Avendra International. In most luxury hotels, ownership, management, and on-property operations are making procurement decisions at times without a shared strategy. The result is fragmented supplier relationships, missed negotiation power, and operational friction that quietly cost properties more than they realize. And today, we'll explore what it looks like when those three layers ultimately operate as one, and what becomes possible when they do. To jump into it, let's introduce today's speakers. We have John C. Tolbert, Senior Vice President at BRE Hotels and Resorts. Molly Preston, Senior Vice President of Procurement with Pyramid Global Hospitality. Marcus Lee, Executive Vice President in Development at HVS. And Mark Rademacher, Global Head of Hospitality and Gaming with Adyen. So let's jump into it. I'd like to first ask our group about their view on procurement and where it stands today. And, John, let's jump into it with you.
Good morning, everyone. When we think about procurement, it's easy to think about purchasing, but from a ownership perspective, procurement isn't purchasing. It's actually capital allocation that happens every single day. Every case of wine, every steak, every linen, every mattress, every technology platform is really an investment decision. Individually, they're small. Collectively, they're one of the largest drivers of asset value, guest satisfaction, and investor return. The goal isn't simply to buy cheaper. The goal is to create the greatest long-term value by aligning quality, guest experience, operational efficiency, and financial discipline. As an owner, we're fortunate to work with incredible brands, management company, restaurant operators, procurement partners. When everyone is aligned around transparency, data, and shared economics, everyone wins. The guest receives a better experience, associates have better tools, operators have stronger margins, and investors see higher returns. That's really what procurement should be about, not extracting value from one another, but by creating more together.
John, I don't think I could have said that better myself. You are spot on the money. Molly, let me get your take on where you think procurement is today.
Dorian, can I just say ditto to everything that John said? That was so great. I love it. And really a philosophy and approach that I'm aligned with. Procurement is really about impacting the overall financial success of the property. It's not about buying stuff, right? It's about the total cost of ownership. Not the purchase price of a case itself or the service cost of a technician coming in to the property to do work. It's how the partners were aligned with the goods, the services, the products, the technology that we're actually buying are actually how they play a role in the operation itself. So for me, procurement isn't about just negotiating a lower price. It's about setting the operation up for success and performing better because the decisions we're making help that bottom line flow through at the end of the day.
Amen, Molly. Let me tell you, I think this question is going to get even more difficult as we go down the line because so many gems are being dropped. Let's kick it over to Marcus. Marcus, what's your take?
I think John and Molly are both absolutely right. Procurement is essentially capital allocation, right? And more than that, it's also a risk management function for owners. It's not just kind of purely a procurement, purchasing, or a goods buying function like we think of it in the general sense. John's right. Like every FF&E choice we make in a hotel development, every OS&E choice an asset manager or an operator makes, that gets put into a hotel, right? Every deal point on a PIP negotiation with a brand, for example, every vendor contract, all that kind of eventually shows up in some way, shape, or form in the hotel's gross operating product, a GOP, right? It shows up and flow through, and ultimately what that does, for an owner or a lender or even a firm like HVS, right, that values assets, it affects the valuation at exit, and which is kind of the all important factor for an owner. So yeah, I think this is a great conversation to have. Like procurement is not something that it might be now, like entering a conversation kind of after the deal is underwritten or after a design is finalized. It should be, it's one of those things that really should be at the room or in the room at underwriting. It should be part of the financial model, because when we do our underwriting, the numbers in the model are only as real or as accurate as a procurement assumption could become.
Oh, that's such the truth. And you know what, Marcus? I think I'm going to grab a handcuff and handcuff you to me, and you're coming with me on all of my trips. Because I think you're absolutely right. I think procurement has to be at the table in the onset of the deal, as we're understanding what kind of product we're looking to offer in a market, from maybe more so the developer and asset owner standpoint, all the way to how do we deliver that premier guest experience based on what we're trying to build. So I appreciate you, and I'm going to definitely hold you to that, Marcus, even though I'm making you do it. And so, Mark, to close it out, I'd love to hear what you think, especially as one of our supplier partners here on the call. Let me know what your thoughts on where procurement stands are.
Yeah, I love hearing the thoughts. It's always fun to go last, but I'll try to come up with something that's kind of interesting from our perspective. So, Adyen's a payment service provider, and what we found when we were scaling hospitality was there's actually quite a bifurcated uh, difference between the owners and operators from a procurement standpoint. I think the philosophy and the strategy is quite unified, but it's in the details and then in the planning and then the go to market and some of the nuances that we need to tease out. And we've seen quite some challenges between understanding who the right decision makers are, who wants to take payments on, whether that's sort of at the property level or if it's done more at a brand level. It's been an interesting experience for us. Yeah, I'm definitely happy to dive into that a little bit further on in this call today.
Mark, I mean, you said it, and I think that really is gonna help me. It really drives into a question that I have to ask next, which is what factors should organizations consider when they're making and executing procurement decisions across the product lifecycle? I asked this question thinking that there are KPIs that are different based on what stage of the asset life cycle you're in. So, Marcus, I'd love to start with you on that one to understand what those factors you would consider in your part of the life cycle.
Sure. Thanks, Dorian. I think, for background, it's probably John and I, right, that are on this panel that are, we see procurement from both ends, right? Advising owners on the development stage of, building a hotel and up to the point where the hotel is built and, and we asset manage the hotels afterwards. So then these decisions that go into development actually kind of impact us and impact the hotel. So I'll kind of break it up into kind of like the two parts. As an asset manager, I would say we're not directly tracking procurement or the procurement strategy necessarily day to day. The way it shows up for us as an asset manager is really in kind of the profitability, right? The GOP and how that flows through really to the bottom line and owner distributions, right? An example would be if the management company that we work with is negotiating a great deal on, for example, like something OS&E related in the hotel, like a cleaning agent, for example, but the it might be a product that's harder to use and the housekeeping labor hours increase, then that might be a situation where profitability doesn't really flow through because while the cost of the product might be less, labor hours goes up and ultimately it kind of impacts, the gross operating product. So, as an asset manager, I'm less interested, I would say, in whether the hotel or an operator bought supplies cheaper for, this quarter, this year, whatever it is, but more interested in whether the GOP really kind of flows through for ownership, making sure that profitability numbers are stable or are improving. And that's kind of really the metric we look at, or KPI we look at. From, I would say something to think about for that is there may be some misalignment there. So maybe like further down the conversation, we can think of something about how, as an asset manager, we could incentivize or, build it almost into the management fee structure if procurement is an important conversation. From a development advisor, or from, advising owners on the development side as part of our work, I would say, the KPIs are really kind of drilled in on cost, right? So whether the FF&E or the PIT budget in the underwriting model is as close to reality as possible, right? So, HVS publish a development cost survey every year. We kind of get benchmarks on how much hotels are getting built, right? So like luxury hotels in the latest survey in 2026 that came out, for example, I think it's somewhere just under 2 million is the average cost of building a luxury hotel, and 1.6 million per key is the median number for building these luxury hotels. And the FF&E cost is over 100,000 per room. So I would say that's a number we look at. And, a number that we want to kind of stick to. So a real life example of that would be, if we do a, development cost budget or a PIP, for example. Let's just do a PIP just because it's easier to think about. A change of ownership or, a PIP, that a property improvement plan that a hotel has to do. A full service hotel these days, I would say typical FF&E cost is $25,000, right? So if the bid comes to $25,000 per room, if the actual bid comes in anywhere, say like 10 to 20% over the number that, the owner or the consulting might have underwritten in the pro forma, that alone can move the IRR, the deal metrics, by a point or maybe even more. So I would say that's kind of an important metric that we look at. We want to make sure that that we're as close as possible when we're doing the underwriting to what the actual cost of FF&E would be.
Okay. So it's safe to say that like net operating income, you said the GOP flow through, like cost of ownership, not just the purchase price, is these are going to be some KPIs that you would look for or prioritize as you kind of think through it. Okay.
Exactly.
John, are we in the ballpark?
I think so. I think, as Marcus said, the classic asset management question, this is an opportunity to really shift the question from the initial cost to the lifestyle value. I think the biggest mistake organizations make is optimizing for purchase price instead of optimizing for total life and cycle value. Owners don't own products. We own the financial and operational outcomes that those products create over time.
John, I have a question for you. It's a little bit of a curveball, but I just kind of experienced this. And from the GPO side, we're often kind of at the intersection of, what an asset manager, might deem to be a thing, and then what the operator might deem to be a thing. And Molly, I'm going to get to you. I cannot wait to hear your take on this. But I had a client who had a 14-year-old kitchen set. We're talking combi oven, 8-burner stove, grill with the ovens, the whole deal. And one of those stoves went up and needs to be replaced. And so my recommendation was, hey, look, the average life cycle on this set is about 12 years. You're 2 years to the good on it. And I think it's time to replace it. And I was met with the harshest of feedback with that, because it's $150,000 to replace the whole suite. So, you know what? Actually, John, I think I'd like to take you with me to this particular location so that I can have you kind of say what you just said, because sometimes I think it can be a finicky thing when the asset owner doesn't want to acknowledge maybe sometimes that the life cycle is past its prime. So anyway, I just wanted to share that.
Yeah, I think you're spot on. I mean, I think that as really as an owner, we look at it and we have different models based on which fund something might be purchased in. So is it a long-term investment? Is our horizon decades, or are we in a buy, fix, sell mode where it's 3 to 5, 5 to 7 years? And I think honestly that does come into play from an owner's perspective. But I think you got to think about it from the brand's perspective. Brands need to protect consistency, owners protect capital, and great operators know their objectives aren't competing, they're complementary.
Oh, that's so true. That's so true. Molly, I'd love to hear your thoughts as a former operator. I think this
I
would be
agree with
pretty
all of
aligned.
this. So Pyramid's primarily a third-party operator, but we do go in and evaluate properties as well for underwriting, right? And one of the properties I was recently at for this purpose, to John's point, right? The life of the equipment matters so much in terms of your CapEx evaluation and the life of assets. And, when you don't have operators who are doing really great PM, man, that life that I'm so good on that property of yours, Dorian, for extending it past the 12 years, right? But in some instances, that equipment goes down early if operators don't keep up with the proper maintenance. So that wasn't, what I had in mind for metrics, but it was a great, I think, dovetail to John's point there. But ultimately, from a management company perspective, everything ultimately comes down to profitability, to Marcus's point. Procurement certainly tracks things like savings, compliance, supplier performance, contract utilization, but those aren't ultimately the end goal. They're just indicators of whether we're helping the hotel operate more effectively for that end goal. So every department has different metrics to help us to that end. And when looking at products and services, we really need to consider that total cost of ownership. How long is that piece of equipment going to last? What is the efficacy rate of the cleaning product? Will it have an impact on labor, right? It's just not the cost of the case, but what really impacts that bottom line flow through. I did want to give a shout out to our CEO, Pyramid CEO, Warren Fields. He really loves to remind us that the properties within our portfolio at Pyramid, those who consistently meet or beat their financial performance goals, use all of our systems. And I think that's really key. When you're using the tools and resources available to you, your team is much more easily able to succeed on that profitability standpoint.
I agree so much with that. And it sounds like, all of these things in a nutshell, kind of tie into brand standard compliance, guest experience, consistency, like when we're considering all of these KPIs and factors. And I really think there's a way that they all can coexist throughout all pieces of the asset life cycle. But to that, Molly, I'm gonna come back to you because I read an article from the AHLA, and it reported that 65% of hotels they surveyed say that they still face challenges on all kinds of levels, including like housekeeping with labor shortages and front desk with labor shortages. So I want to ask you, as an operator, like what key roadblocks exist within the procurement and operational landscape, and how do you think that we align to address those?
Yeah, it's a great question. I think at the end of the day, when we're treating our people right, when we're making them number one, they take care of our guests and they take care of the asset. I think the biggest opportunity is operator feedback. When we can make a product look great on paper financially, but the people who use it every day, will actually tell you whether it's going to be successful or not, whether it worked out, whether it cost them more labor. We recently did a model room where the decorative light switches were hidden under the lampshade. And because the property's chief engineer was involved in the renovation process, he was able to provide some key feedback in the placement of that switch early enough so that the decorator was able to change the design from it being under the lampshade, which caused it to fall over, get cracked, have lots of repairs, to the base of the lampshade. I mean, this is really a simple switch in terms of design, but it wouldn't have really surfaced unless his voice was in the room to be heard, right? So bringing those operators into the conversations helps avoid expensive changes later or costs or frustrated employees or guests.
And I want to plug at this point my colleagues, because that is a HVS Asset Management Hotel.
It was an
Am I
HVS.
Right?
Yes, it was.
So Dorian, our company
job.
walks the talk.
They do. We love it, Marcus. Yes.
So Marcus, from where you sit, what roadblocks exist? I mean, your HVS manages this from not only the development side, but also, the management side. So where do you think this stands?
I think, from the, representing an owner as an asset manager, I would say a roadblock that, I've encountered personally would be, I would say the delegation of authority, right? It's like CapEx is a big spend, or anything. The purchasing decision could sometimes be a big spend, right? Are you looking to replace carpet that may be six figures? And I think that, the delegation, or, who can make that decision sometimes serves as a roadblock, really. Like, who can approve what level of CapEx? And it becomes kind of like a negotiating point. Is it something that's on the operator side? Is it something that the asset manager, or does it even have to go to owners to approve, right? So I think yeah, that's something that I've experienced. And while all that is happening, sometimes, as you guys all well know, the vendor's price lock may expire, right? The cost goes up while this decision is getting deliberated, really. So I think that that's something that we could think about in the future. It's like kind of a delegation of authority, right? Who can approve what, and maybe this is something that's written into the management agreement when we when we've negotiated, or when we're helping owners do an operator search or negotiate management agreements, so that the procurement process can kind of flow more smoothly, and everyone knows what their roles are, and doesn't stall, essentially, RFPs.
I think that's well said. I think you got to think about the constituencies, right? We have the brands, we have the management companies, and we have obviously investor perspective. And I think the brand's job is to protect the consistency. Owner's job is to protect the capital. Great operators know the objectives aren't competing, they're actually complementary. And the best management companies think like owners, and the best owners respect the operators. And I think the best procurement partners create transparency between those two. And then from an investor perspective, every basis point matters, but procure isn't about saving money. It's about increasing enterprise value for our investors. So I think ultimately, when people respect the totality of the ecosystem we're in, we all get the outcome. It's when the individual stakeholders aren't aligned across the overall stakeholder universe.
John, I think you hit on something there, on the alignment piece. Especially when you say, the management, the operators, they think like owners, and then owners who also have been former operators who think like operators. And I think that reciprocity is something. There's something to that, where everyone can appreciate everyone's different role, and in the whole cycle. Um, and to that, I think that data plays a pretty good point, and not only just the experiential appreciation of what each part of the equation adds to it, but can also back up key decisions and thoughts when we talk about procurement, um, for the asset as a whole. So, Mark, I want to kick over to you, and I want to ask you, what role do you think data plays in procurement and operational making? And do you think there's an opportunity for better cross-functional alignment?
Oh, 100%. I mean, going back to even the earlier point we were talking about with roadblocks, and I think, John hit it on the head. Like, there are so many different stakeholders. And I mean, coming from a vendor side, I think there's often a lack of understanding of what that really is, and an alignment on that across the different stakeholders, because they have different KPIs. So just coming across it and then being able to manage that. I think the outcome of that and able to support that is the data itself, right? At Adyen, we talk about the difference between data and insights. Hotels are swimming in data, but is it insightful? And can you piecemeal all of that through the different hierarchy of the stakeholders to come up with something that's really tangible and can provide, evidence to that ROI? Because I think that's really, really what's important. And we've heard it from Molly and from Marcus too, that it's ultimately, if you can't produce like what that comes through, I think that's really the strength of procurement here, is to be able to kind of leverage that data and say, here's the outcome and this is what it is. And that becomes an input into the life cycle process for the future and for the next opportunity and the next deal, particularly from a technology perspective.
Absolutely. From a Vendra standpoint, 75 to 85% of each of our hotel spend comes through the Avendra program. And so understanding from an enterprise level, what the hotels are buying, why they're buying it, whether or not they're staying on program, if that's a KPI, whether they're staying within brand standard, which is an important KPI for guest satisfaction and, well, frankly, delivering upon the brand promise that hospitality management groups set forth. I think it's just so critical, so crucial. Molly, I'm gonna kick it to you. In your opinion, as the person who guides procurement for your organization, I bet data is a big piece of your compass.
Yeah, data is huge. Data really helps us move from assumptions to informed decisions. It helps our owners save money in looking at the guest foot traffic in high use areas where certain seating or FF&E is invested. Um, I thought about an example of this at a recent property I was visiting, who's focusing on how they can impact their top line revenue metric portion. Wellness is really exploding in the hospitality segment, and this particular property has a large spa and wellness component. And they also have families who visit, and they have a lot of really fun activities throughout the resort to accommodate for that group. And part of their footprint, actually strategically located somehow next to the spa, was a huge arcade. And the arcade was bringing in, I mean, just really trickling in dollars, hardly getting usage. And so they did an ROI to propose to replace this arcade, to expand out their spa, particularly for wellness components. And it will have immense impact, top line, bottom line, right? So we, as a portfolio and the property, really need to look at opportunities that exist beyond just what are offering today, but what is the market looking for? And we can look at data and insights for that.
Understood. I have a curious question for you, Molly. So for the property to be able to execute on this, does this usually come out of like operating income? Is this a CapEx thing? Is there a conversation that has to happen with ownership? And if so, what's the pitch to show that this is more of a viable situation than maybe the arcade next to the spa?
Yeah, so great question. It absolutely includes our owners. Certainly, it's ideation that's created internally, sometimes with our asset managers in partnership with that, right? And our property team will do the analysis and present to ownership. I don't think anyone wants to turn down huge, increases in profitability, right? But it is, we really, as operators, we have to think how a decision will impact the asset today, tomorrow, and 5 years down the road. Ultimately, our owners are looking as real estate investors to increase the asset value of the property. And will this have long-term impacts? So, yes to your answer, all your question, all of the above. We do involve owners. Ultimately, it is an ownership decision. It is a capital expense to expand out or convert an arcade into a spa wellness type facility.
Understood. I tell you what, if you had Mortal Kombat in the arcade, then I would probably take Mortal
You'd
Kombat
cry.
over a
My
massage.
kids would cry.
But
All of our money goes to the arcade and marathon. But ultimately we're able to pivot, right? Other really fun activities. My kids have just as much fun with s'mores kits around the fire pit and movie night at those resorts as they do in the arcade, right?
absolutely. John, are you approving the arcade to spa transition?
Well, I can tell you that we work closely with Pyramid, particularly on our Sunseeker Gulf Coast Florida resort, and we're looking at a new arcade right now, and all the stakeholders are aligned that it's a must, and we're just moving it a little farther away from the spa, fortunately, but we're excited about it. But I think
Love it.
your question on data is such an important one, right? If we can't measure it, we got to challenge it as an ownership group. And data is becoming the operating system for procurement. Historically, as you know, procurement was really driven by relationships and contracts and purchase price. And today we're asking much broader questions: which purchasing decision creates the greatest long-term value for our assets? And as an owner, we just don't care about what something costs. We care about the total economic impact. And data allows us to connect the purchasing decision to guest satisfaction, to food waste, to labor productivity, equipment life, sustainability, and ultimately EBITDA and asset value. And then you couple that with what AI is doing for us as an accelerator that transforms this. Instead of looking backwards at our monthly purchasing reports, we now have a great opportunity to move towards predictive procurement, anticipated commodity pricing, identifying supplier risk, optimizing inventory levels, reducing waste and culinary, even understanding how ingredient qualities influence guest sentiment and repeat business. So this is where the industry is heading, and procurement becomes a strategic business intelligence function instead of just a purchasing function.
For sure. For sure. Procurement data is business intelligence. And if we're not leveraging a way to connect all of our different systems and share that data up and down the chain through ownership and operations as well, then I think there's a valuable piece of the pie that's missing. I want to kick it back over to Mark. I want to ask you, what prevents suppliers from becoming true strategic partners within luxury hotel procurement ecosystems? What are you seeing?
I think it starts with the partnership and building trust towards that. It takes time across that, and it's evident in the ROI that's being built. Ultimately, it's important for really good partners to be involved a little bit early in the process. I'll give you an example of that. We worked with a luxury hotel group that actually came to us because they wanted to eliminate the front desk, and they really wanted to create a very high touch experience, bringing guests and checking in inside the room, only to realize after purchasing several different iPads and everything, they didn't think about payments until the very last minute. And they were scrambling for a solution that would kind of accompany that. A true partner, would be there a little bit earlier in that process, and to be able to identify where there might be just a lack of knowledge in a certain subject, and leveraging your vendor community and making sure that there's some very good education that can come out of that to help build and fortify some of these experiences that hotels want to build for the future. And I think the other one I wanted to just comment on, Dorian, is in a vacuum, some partners are great, but the question is, can they work and play nice with others? And we've seen some huge challenges across that, right? Like you might find a great PMS that will work ideally for a certain brand type, but is it going to work with the POS, the payment provider? All of those things have to be in sync and provide the goals together. And I think we see sometimes a real lack of cohesion between the partners, and that fundamentally, that's something that as an industry, we just need to improve on.
Understood. So it sounds like you may be saying, leverage your supplier partnerships as almost as your consultants, essentially.
Yeah.
Because Mark, I would beg to say that no one knows payments as good as you do, right? Because Adyen makes its business the business of payments and other things. So I definitely hear you there. I want to kick it over to Marcus. What do you think prevents suppliers from becoming true strategic partners?
I think Mark is right. We have to look at suppliers, from a holistic perspective. They're really kind of holistic partners in every sense of the word. And I think with every partner, communication is important, right? And I think that sometimes that might not be as well thought out now. Strategic partners or suppliers are seen as suppliers, right? They're like, okay, when we need something, we come to you, and there's not, constant communication or leveraging all aspects that a supplier could be. I think that we see that happen a lot from an asset manager standpoint, typically in transitions. We help owners with transitions, be it a management transition where we, do an operator search, or a brand transition where we do a brand search. And I think a lot of continuity or goodwill is hurt or even wasted, right? From, building up years of a strong supplier relationship, pricing relationship, whatever it may be. Supplier understands the property, what the property needs, and when that change happens, be it management or brand, it kind of goes out the door, and we kind of have to reset and start rebuilding new relationships. So I think, communication is, we have to get front and center of that, and just make sure that everyone's aware. Like the new brand or the new operator might be aware that, hey, we've had multi-year agreements or multi-year contracts with X supplier, and that may be something that could be beneficial or just looked at in a transition. So I think better communication, really.
Okay. John, what do you think?
Hospitality is one of the few industries where every purchasing decision touches every guest experience. So really, procurement is therefore much more than sourcing product, right? It's about protecting the brand. It's about empowering the operator. It's about creating trust amongst our partners. And it's about generating returns for our investors. And when all the stakeholders are aligned around transparency, shared value creation, procurement stops being what I call a back of the house function and becomes much more of a strategic advantage. And that's where I believe the industry's headed. And it only happens that way through true alignment and shared interests.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Molly, you're close to the actual operators. What do you think?
Yeah, I love all of that. And the thing I dislike hearing most throughout my career has been stay in your lane, right? I'm like, I can't make strategic decisions or impact the organization staying in just a purchasing function, right? And so I think Marcus, and John all spoke to that. Sometimes with our supplier partners, we sometimes make it unintentionally difficult. And at the end of the day, the best suppliers don't just deliver products to our hotels or properties. They understand our operations, and we leverage them for their expertise. To Mark's point, right? He is the expert in payments. And it means, keeping things simple, helping them understand how they can best help us and how we can best help them. So responsive communication, understanding really how we operate, recognizing that every delay or unnecessary step creates roadblocks. If I expected my delivery at 7 a.m. and it comes at 11 a.m., in the middle of checkout or a lunch rush, right? It's a huge impact. And so really working together, I think everyone mentioned communication is incredibly important.
Absolutely. Sounds like I'm hearing communication between our supplier partners and operators, and then also leveraging our supplier partners as the experts in what they do. Okay, so we're getting close to the end of our webinar today. So I just wanted to do a quick around the horn with one final thought that I have. What organizational changes are needed for ownership, management, and operations and suppliers to function as a single unified procurement unit? You can give me one word or one sentence. And Molly, I'm looking at you right now, so I'm going to start with you.
Okay, great. Well, I think we just spoke about it, right? Including all stakeholders from the beginning. Alignment has to start, it has to be the start with visibility across all functions.
All right. I love that. Mark, we're coming to you next.
All right, I'll just go right ahead and build on that. I think we'll solve all the problems today. The one that I want to do is just really building on that communication that comes from that and the trust that we can all work on to deliver that end goal. So if we have that, if we understand what those deliverables truly are and what a hotel wants in the future, we can really help plan ahead for for that scenario.
All righty. Marcus, I'm coming to you.
I would say, my one word would be earlier, right? Like Molly's right, and kind of what I alluded to at the start. I think that procurement needs to be brought to the room way earlier in a conversation, like when before a deal closes. It has to start at underwriting. Procurement's got to be there, working with operations and asset management, and we're all looking at the same numbers or getting better data really before dollars are committed.
Absolutely. Absolutely. I love that, Marcus. John, closing with you, sir.
Procurement is a capital allocation. Transparency creates value. Alignment beats negotiation. Scale should benefit the hotel. The lowest cost always isn't the lowest cost. And I think when we think about this, the higher, again, a higher quality product reduces waste. A higher quality beef creates a higher guest satisfaction. A better linen lasts another year. And this is where procurement wins.
Absolutely. I love that. I'm going to throw one in there too. I'm going to say transparency. I think that if we all are in this together, as we've all said on this call, and as such, since we're all in this together, I think that if we are communicating with one another transparently, everyone understanding what the end game and the end goal is, even given the different parts of this that we serve, I think we'll be all aligned properly. Well, I'm going to close it there. And to close, I'd like to thank you all for joining the International Luxury Hotel Association's webinar series. Thank you to Avendra International for making this webinar possible. The opportunity in front of luxury hospitality is not just cost savings, it's operational coherence. And when ownership, management, and operations move as one, the supplier relationships become stronger, the decisions get smarter, and the guest experience benefits from the consistency that a fragmented procurement supply cannot deliver. If you found this session useful, please share it with your network. You can find this recording at ilha.org. Molly, Mark, Marcus, and John, I appreciate the conversation today. Thank you so much.